In a war of bullets, tanks, and bombs, one man brought a sword, a longbow, and a set of bagpipes. His name was Jack Churchill, but the world would remember him as Mad Jack. And when German troops stepped into his ambush, the first thing they heard was the soft twang of a bowstring yes. In World War II, someone actually made a kill with medieval longbow. This is the true story of the last longbow kill in modern warfare, and the wildest warrior to ever fight in World War II. It's the spring of 1940. The world is being torn apart by war. Nazi forces are blitzing their way across Europe, and France is collapsing fast. The British Expeditionary Force is in retreat. Chaos, gunfire, smoke. Soldiers scramble through muddy fields and shattered villages. But in the middle of this chaos, there's one man who's different. He's walking through the woods with a calmness that doesn't belong on a battlefield. Over his shoulder, a 6-foot-long English longbow. At his waist, a Scottish broadsword. And in his eyes, the kind of madness that doesn't flinch in the face of death. His name is Jack Churchill, but history would remember him as Mad Jack. He wasn't mad. Not really. He was focused. Old school. A soldier out of time, dropped into the 20th century from a medieval battlefield. While others carried Lee Enfields and grenades, he carried honor, steel, silence. Near the French village of Lepanet, Jack is leading a small patrol. Word is there's a German unit nearby. Most men would wait out, calling backup. Jack doesn't. He sets the ambush himself. He crouches, motionless. The longbow is already in his hand. No sound, no breath, and then movement. A German scout steps into clearing, unaware he's being watched. Most soldiers would fire a rifle, but Jack Churchill lifts the longbow, draws an arrow from the quiver strapped to his back, and pulls the string tight. The muscles in his arms lock. The bow creaks. Then silence shatters. The arrow flies, a sharp, whispering death gliding through the trees. The German soldier collapses before he even hears it. That moment is history. It's the last confirmed longbow kill in modern warfare. In a war of tanks, planes, and machine guns, one man chose to fight like a medieval knight, and won. But for Churchill, this wasn't some eccentric display. He wasn't showing off. He was deadly serious. He believed modern war had forgotten something. Courage wasn't just about killing. It was about how you stood, how you carried yourself. He wanted to remind people that bravery didn't need a trigger. Sometimes it needed a blade or a bow. And that wasn't even the strangest part, because Jack Churchill didn't just kill with arrows. He led men with music. He fought with a sword. And when all hope was lost, he reached for his bagpipes and played them under fire. You could spot him from a mile away on the battlefield, sword gleaming at his side, pipes draped over his shoulder, sometimes humming, sometimes whistling, always walking toward danger like it was calling him by name. He would become one of the most legendary commandos of World War II. But at this moment, with the longbow still warm in his hands, he was just getting started. This was only the opening shot of a career that would defy logic, history, and death itself. And it all began with one arrow, in a war that forgot what arrows were for. The water was cold. Not just cold, it bit through boots, soaked socks, and climbed into every bone. Off the coast of Norway, in a steel-gray morning fog, a landing craft lurched and rocked in the icy surf. Inside it, a group of British commandos crouched low, silent, tense, waiting for the ramp to drop. Each man carried a rifle, grenades, fear, except for one. At the front of the boat, standing upright, completely exposed to the freezing wind, was a man in full British uniform, wearing a tartan. A broadsword hung from his belt, and cradled under one arm, bagpipes. As the boat neared the shore, he lifted the pipes, closed his eyes, and began to play. The tune? March of the Cameron Men. A Scottish battle hymn, bold and defiant. The pipes wailed to the fog, bouncing off the cliffs. The men behind him stared, stunned. On shore, German troops looked up, confused. And as the ramp slammed down, the madman stepped off into Nazi-occupied Norway, still playing. That was Mad Jack Churchill's entrance. This was Operation Archery, December 27, 1941. The British commandos had been ordered to launch a surprise raid on the German-held Norwegian town of Vagsøy. The objective: destroy infrastructure, disrupt supply lines, and hit Nazi morale. It was risky. The town was heavily defended, the weather brutal, and escape uncertain. But Churchill wasn't worried. He didn't just go ashore with pipes and sword for show. He led from the front, the first man onto the beach. Pipes blaring, sword gleaming. The Germans opened fire. Bullets cracked and hissed. Churchill slung the bagpipes across his back, drew his sword, and charged. Not with a rifle, not with cover. With a broadsword, sprinting full tilt across the sand like a medieval knight reborn. The commandos followed. And somehow, the madness worked. Churchill tore through the town like a ghost from the past. In street-to-street combat, he used his sword to signal direct troops and, when close enough, fight. One stunned German officer reportedly surrendered immediately after seeing the blade. He didn't know what kind of war he'd just stepped into, but it definitely wasn't the one he trained for. Churchill's section cleared building after building, pushing through gunfire, shrapnel, and machine gun nests. He was relentless. At one point, pinned down in an alleyway, a young commando froze. Jack knelt beside him, unsheathed the sword again, and said calmly, "Come on then, lad. Let's show them how it's done." Then stood and walked into fire. The raid was a success. The commandos destroyed multiple Nazi installations, captured documents, took prisoners, and torched supply depots. They lost men, yes, but the Germans were stunned, not just by the speed of the raid, but by its spirit. Who the hell brings a sword to a firefight? Who plays bagpipes under machine gun fire? Who walks into war like it's some ancient ritual? The answer was Mad Jack Churchill. Later, when asked why he carried a broadsword, he replied simply, "In my opinion, sir, any officer who goes into action without a sword is improperly dressed." He meant it. It wasn't a quirk, it was a belief, a statement. In an age of mechanized death, Churchill believed in symbolism, morale, presence. The enemy shouldn't just be shot, they should be terrified. And his own men, they followed him, not because they had to, but because he made them believe they were invincible. That if a man could march into battle playing bagpipes, wielding steel, and somehow live, then maybe they could too. Operation Archery wasn't just a military strike. It was a performance, a war drama with Churchill as lead actor, director, and choreographer. But there was nothing fake about it. The risk was real. The bullets were real. The blood was real. And still, Churchill brought a broadsword. By the end of the mission, Mad Jack had earned a new level of fame. Among the commandos, he was a legend. Among the Germans, a ghost. Stories spread, some true, some exaggerated. But all of them shared one truth. This was not a normal soldier. This was something else. Something older. After Norway, Churchill didn't slow down. He volunteered for every dangerous mission he could. Always out front. Always armed with his strange, ancient tools. Sword, pipes, and when needed, silence. Because he still carried the longbow. And yes, he still trained with it. What happened next would take him to Italy. And there, on another battlefield, he'd do the unthinkable again. A sword, a corporal, and 42 German prisoners. But that's the next chapter. For now, picture this, a frozen beach, a man in uniform, wind blowing through his hair, a broadsword in one hand, bagpipes in the other, and the sound of the battle hymn echoing across Nazi lines, played not from safety, but from the front, because sometimes madness is just another word for courage. Southern Italy, September 1943. The sun burns low over the Tyrrhenian Sea. American and British forces have landed on the beaches of Salerno, fighting to push north into Mussolini's fractured empire. The terrain is brutal. Mountains, vineyards, crumbling farmhouses, and tucked into every hillside, dug deep and waiting German resistance. It's not a storm of tanks and planes now. This is infantry war. Dirty, close, terrifying. And in the middle of it all, here comes a man with the sword again. Jack Churchill. Except now, he's not just an eccentric officer. He's a commanding officer of No. 2 Commando, a hardened, elite unit trained for night raids, demolitions, and guerrilla warfare. But Jack, he still carries his longbow, still has his Scottish broadsword, still leads every charge, and still believes that if death's coming for him, it better come properly dressed. Salerno wasn't going well. The Allies were fighting through a mess of artillery, machine gun nests, and counterattacks. Commandos had been dropped behind enemy lines to cut off German reinforcements. Churchill's mission? Take the high ground. Hold it, no matter what. He led his men inland, scaling the hills under cover darkness. The terrain was treacherous, switchbacks, rock walls, sniper fire. But Jack was relentless. He moved fast, always out front, sword in hand, whispering orders over the wind. At one point, they came across a farmhouse complex, dark, silent, suspicious. Churchill signaled his men to spread out. Then, with only one other commando by his side, a corporal, he crept toward the building. What happened next has been told in war stories ever since. Inside that farmhouse were 42 German soldiers. 42. Resting, eating, cleaning weapons. They had no idea 2 British commandos were standing just outside their door. So what does Jack Churchill do? He kicks the door open and steps inside, with his sword drawn. Picture that moment. A crowded room. German soldiers frozen mid-bite, mid-step, staring at this wild-eyed Brit, covered in sweat and dust, long blades shining in the low light. And next to him, one corporal, one rifle. Jack raises a sword and shouts, "Hand hoch!" Hands up. Silence. Then the Germans actually drop their weapons. All of them. No shots fired. No backup needed. Just a man with a blade and a presence that told everyone in the room, "Don't test me. You'll lose." Churchill marched all 42 prisoners down the hillside at sword point. When they got to the British lines, a bewildered officer asked, "Where'd you find all these?" Jack just smiled. "Oh, they were just up the hill waiting." Some said it was luck. Others said it was madness. But the truth? It was confidence. Audacity. Jack Churchill believed that war wasn't just about numbers. It was about momentum, energy, fear. If you walk into a room like you own it, especially with a sword, even the enemy starts to believe it. And if they don't, well, Jack had no problem using the sword too. He wasn't bluffing. That night became legend within the commando ranks. The man who took on an entire platoon with just a sword and a stare. It wasn't just bravery. It was theater. Churchill turned war into performance art, one where every gesture had meaning. His men followed him not because they were ordered to, but because they knew deep down that if anyone could make it out alive, it was a guy with a broadsword. The Salerno campaign raged on. Churchill would go on a fight through more Italian terrain, ambushing supply routes, sabotaging bridges, and always leading from front. But something had changed. Even the enemy started whispering about the mad British officer who came out of the mist with a blade, about the longbow marksman who struck silently from the trees, about the piper who played while his men bled. The myth of Mad Jack was now spreading, and not just among Allied ranks. Churchill didn't slow down. The more dangerous the mission, the faster he volunteered. If there was a back door into a battlefield, he was already kicking it in. After Salerno, he would head east toward Yugoslavia, toward one of the most dangerous raids of the war. But before that, a word about the sword. You might think it was ceremonial, just a symbol, a gimmick, but it wasn't. Jack used it, not always to kill, though it could, but to shock, to rally, to lead. In the chaos of war, that curved Scottish blade rising in the moonlight told everyone exactly where to go, what to do, and that the man holding it was not to be messed with. To his men, it was a beacon. To his enemies, the warning. Looking back, the image is still almost too insane to believe. 2 men, 42 prisoners, and a sword. But it happened. It's written down, witnessed, reported, celebrated. Because in a world where everyone fought the same, Jack Churchill was the one who didn't. And because of that, he was the one who always stood out. Next stop, the Balkans. And there, Jack would play his bagpipes one last time before everything went black. Because on a hilltop in Yugoslavia, facing death, surrounded by fire and bodies, he made a choice no soldier would dare. He played the pipes, while the enemy closed in. By 1944, Jack Churchill was tired, but you wouldn't know it by looking at him. He'd survived combat in France, Norway, and Italy. He'd led charges with a sword, taken down enemies with a longbow, and captured 42 men without firing a single bullet. But Mad Jack wasn't done. He wanted more. More danger. More chaos. More war. And the war had just a thing for him. The Balkans, torn apart by Axis occupation, Nazi control, and a rising force of Yugoslav partisans fighting back from the shadows. The British needed someone to support them, someone insane enough to drop behind enemy lines, train guerrilla fighters, and lead raids on German positions that no one else dared touch. There was only one name on that list, Churchill. His next mission took him to the island of Brač, off the coast of modern-day Croatia. The objective? Assist Yugoslav partisans in driving out a well-armed German garrison. It was supposed to be a coordinated assault, part British commandos, part local fighters. It turned out to be a bloodbath. Churchill's unit made landfall under cover of darkness. By dawn, the assault had already begun to unravel. Miscommunication, bad intel. Some units had pulled back. Others were delayed. And the Germans? They were ready. What was meant to be a multi-pronged raid became a suicide mission. But Jack didn't back down. With just 6 men, he pressed forward, uphill, toward machine gun nests and mortar fire. One by one, his men were hit. A shell exploded behind them. Then another. The hillside became a mess of craters, limbs, and smoke, until there was just one man left standing. Mad Jack. And what did he do? Did he hide? Did he retreat? No. He picked up his bagpipes, stood tall on the hillside, and began to play. The tune? Will Ye No Come Back Again? A Scottish lament, often played for lost soldiers. The sound drifted over chaos. Haunting, beautiful, defiant, a lone man, playing for no one, while the enemy crept closer. Then darkness. A grenade landed nearby. The blast didn't kill him, but it threw him to the ground. When German soldiers found him, he was unconscious, his bagpipes lying beside him, still intact. They didn't kill him. They didn't dare. He was taken to Berlin, not just as a prisoner, but as a curiosity. Who was this British officer who led raids with a sword, who charged into battle with music, who kept surviving? Churchill was shipped to Sachsenhausen, a concentration camp, infamous for housing political prisoners, spies, and resistance fighters. Torture, disease, death. But Mad Jack, he had other plans. Within weeks, he escaped. Digging under the wire with a fellow RAF officer, he vanished into the woods. They wandered for days, sleeping in ditches, foraging food, dodging patrols. But winter was cruel. Exposure caught up with them. Weakened. They were recaptured near the Baltic coast, thrown back into chains. But Churchill didn't stop trying. The war was nearly over when he was finally liberated. American forces stormed the camp. The gates opened. And Jack, he didn't wait for a ride home. He found a kitchen knife, carved it into a makeshift weapon, and started walking 150 miles toward the nearest Allied unit. Because if you're Mad Jack Churchill, that's just another Tuesday. But here's the part most people don't know. After he returned to England, after surviving some of the worst conditions in the war, Jack wasn't celebrated. He wasn't given medals. He wasn't thrown a parade. He was told to rest, to sit down, let others take it from here. Churchill hated it. When the Allies dropped atomic bombs on Japan and the war came to an end, Jack reportedly said, "It wasn't for those damn Yanks. We could have kept the war going another 10 years. Was he joking? Maybe. But there's a part of him, deep down, that probably meant it. Because peace didn't suit Mad Jack. He wasn't built for silence. He was built for the sound of pipes over gunfire. The raid on Brač was his last true combat. But the story doesn't end there. Because even in peace, Jack Churchill found ways to defy the ordinary, and in his post-war years, he'd carry that same wild spirit into every room he entered. But that is for the next chapter. Because what does a man like Churchill do after the war ends? He finds another one. And maybe, just maybe, he builds a new kind of legend. The war had ended. Europe was free, or at least free enough. Cities were in ruins. Soldiers were heading home, and governments were beginning the long, painful process of rebuilding peace from rubble. But Jack Churchill, he didn't want to go home, because home meant silence. Home meant boredom. Home meant a world without the bagpipes, the sword, or the longbow. And for Jack, that wasn't life. That was a prison. After the war, Churchill could have retired with honor. He'd earned it. Multiple campaigns, near-death experiences, time in a Nazi concentration camp. He could have slipped into a quiet life, published a book, maybe even gone on a speaking tour. But that wasn't him. Instead, Jack joined the Seaforth Highlanders and went east. First stop, Palestine. It was 1948. The British Mandate was coming to an end, and violence between Jewish and Arab factions was boiling over. British troops were caught in the middle, trying to keep peace in a region spiraling into chaos. To Jack, it was perfect. Another war, another chance to lead from the front. One day, Churchill was commanding a convoy through Jerusalem. They were escorting a convoy of medical students when the column came under heavy fire. Bullets tore through the streets. Cars exploded. In the chaos, a Jewish medical convoy was ambushed and left defenseless. Churchill heard the gunfire and ran toward it. He climbed onto the roof of an armored vehicle, sword drawn, and tried to rescue the trapped students under fire. When he couldn't reach them, he called for reinforcements. But help came too late. 78 people were killed in the ambush. It haunted him, not because he failed, but because he couldn't fight the way he wanted to. Bureaucracy, diplomacy, orders, the things that had no place in Jack Churchill's idea of war. After Palestine, Churchill was officially pulled out of combat. He was transferred to Australia, given a post with the British Army's training schools. A desk job. He hated it, but while in Australia, he found something else to conquer. Surfing. Yes, surfing. In his mid-40s, Jack Churchill learned how to ride the waves like a teenager. He took up board making, caught waves off the coast of Sydney, and once designed a custom surfboard, decades before it became mainstream. He was also the first person to ride a surfboard down the River Severn tidal bore in England. That's right, a surfing war hero catching inland waves in his 50s. Just because he could. Because Jack Churchill didn't care if something made sense. He only cared if it made him feel alive. He still wore his uniform with pride, still carried his longbow, still played the bagpipes, and still, when boarding trains in London, would toss his briefcase out the window of the carriage, then calmly board, walking down the platform to retrieve it as the train pulled away. When asked why, he said it saved time when getting off. Of course, Jack Churchill finally retired from the Army in 1959, but even retirement couldn't tame him. He took up boat building, learned archery again. Sometimes, when walking down the street, he'd pause in front of strangers, stare them down for a second, and then just walk away. People would whisper, "Isn't that the guy with the sword? From the war?" It was. He never lost that look in his eye, like he knew something the rest of us didn't, like he was still watching for ambushes, still measuring wind for arrows, still hearing bagpipes somewhere in the distance, playing a song only he could understand. And maybe he was. In 1996, at the age of 89, Jack Churchill died in Surrey, England. He didn't die in war. He didn't die in fire or steel or silence. He died in peace, which for him might have been the strangest ending of all. But make no mistake, the man lived like few ever have. He broke every rule of modern warfare and came out the other side a legend. He didn't adapt to war. He forced war to adapt to him. So what do you call someone like that? A soldier? A lunatic? A relic? Maybe. But in every generation, there's one man who reminds us that courage isn't always about strategy. Sometimes it's about swagger. And sometimes It's about walking into battle with a sword in one hand and the bagpipes on your shoulder. Most soldiers are remembered for what they did. Jack Churchill is remembered for how he did it. He fought in a war of tanks and air raids with a longbow. He charged into battle under gunfire, playing bagpipes. He captured enemies with a sword. He survived a concentration camp, escaped across enemy lines, and surfed rivers in peacetime just to feel the rush of moving forward. Mad Jack didn't just defy death. He defied normal. And that's why he still matters. See, we live in a time where we're told to follow rules, fit in, play it safe, be realistic. But Churchill didn't buy into that. He believed that if you're going to fight or live, you should do it with everything. Your soul, your music, your madness. Because maybe madness is just another name for refusing to surrender your spirit. Ask yourself this. How many people do you know who have a job title like commando and still feel anonymous? How many people check all the boxes, trained, prepared, armed, and still don't stand out? Now ask again, how many people play the bagpipes and the gunfire? Exactly. Churchill wasn't a better soldier because he carried a sword. He was a better soldier because he believed in the sword, because it stood for something, for honor, for presence, for the power of standing out when everything else tells you to blend in. He wasn't just fighting Nazis. He was fighting conformity. And he was winning. There's a reason his story keeps going viral, again and again, decade after decade. Because we all secretly wonder, what would happen if I stopped doing what was expected? What would happen if I stood up and said, this is who I am, and I don't care if it doesn't fit? Churchill is the answer. You don't have to fit. You have to lead. Even if the world thinks you're mad. Especially then, he wasn't fearless. No one is. But fear didn't run him. It didn't even slow him down. And maybe that's the most powerful lesson of all. That the battle worth fighting is the one where you stay true to yourself. Longbow, sword, pipes and all. So the next time someone tells you your dream is crazy, that you're too different, that your way won't work, remember this. A man once walked into World War II with a sword, and he won.